So our next speaker, I was reassured to have a peek over the desk at the back, and he is with us, live from Nevada, electronically, because that's less budget busting than bringing him over here. So our next speaker is a bit of a legend in cybersecurity. Some of you may have come across him on internet videos and other media. He has just appeared on the screen. FC, welcome to Jersey virtually.
Thank you very much.
You're absolutely lovely to have you here. Now, before I hand over, there is one thing I say. I tend to be a bit pedantic with presenters who come along and try and plug a book or whatever. So I'm going to plug his book for him. So this is FC's book, How I Rob Banks. It's a really cracking read. I'm not just saying it because he stood there or sat there. It really is great. Do give it a look. If anyone's staying for the drinks this evening and would like a copy, this is a prop. I've actually got it on my Kindle. I bought this just so I could wave it at you lot. So if someone can convince me why I should give them that, grab me at wine later. So without further ado, FC, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. And as already mentioned, I'm coming live from Nevada, so it is very early in the morning for me. So I'll try and bring a lot of energy to this. So Nick, if you could put up my slides, and we'll get started. There we go. I remember the first time I kidnapped someone. It's not often you get to say that, but I have a very interesting job. I was asked by a client to break into a data center. Now, this was a standard data center, except for one feature. They had two teams of ex-Gurkha soldiers guarding the place, Team A and Team B. I had to somehow infiltrate this quite impressive building. Somehow I had to get past all of the security, get past the guards, get into the data center, steal millions of dollars, and then get out again. This is quite a difficult operation if you've never done this before. Gurkha guards, if you don't know, are formidable warriors. They're the ones that carry the curved kukri knife. Thankfully, this was in England, so I didn't have to worry about that or guns. What happened was a lot of reconnaissance. For these types of jobs, you have to do recon, and I spent weeks looking at this place. And there was really only one opportunity to get in. All I had to do was kidnap a Gurkha guard. So how do you go about doing this? I spent weeks in a hire car, going past the facility, looking at it, figuring out how to get in through the security barriers. They had two. It was a standard set of two gates. One opened, you drove your car in. The first one shut, the second gate opens, you drive through. So typical man trap, but for a vehicle. I spent some time watching this, and I noticed a couple of flaws with their procedures. Team A would arrive, they would go into the building, they would come out about 10 minutes later and do their stuff. They'd go on patrol. When it came around to shift changeover, Team B would arrive. Every team would go back in, except for one person. The other flaw that I noticed was when cars were coming out, there was an opportunity where both gates were open for a brief, short time, right? So gate B, which is the inside one, opens, the car drives in, but gate A opens way before gate B shuts. So there was some sort of mismatch on the configuration of the gates coming out. So I thought, okay, what do I need to do is basically sit outside. I had a little Ford Fiesta hire car, and if I time it just right, when someone leaves, I can potentially make it through the gates. So during my recon phase, I noticed that I had maybe been noticed by one of the security guards. So I phoned up the hire company and said, I need a new car, same type of car, because the company was paying. They gave me exactly the same model and color. So except for the number plates, everything else was the same. So a little bit worried that they were going to just think that I changed the number plates, but that's all I could do. And then one afternoon, I was sat outside this facility, car was running. Yeah, it was about go time. I saw Team B turn up. They went in. Everyone went inside. Now, the interesting thing here is that one person stood outside, right? And this was around a lunchtime changeover, which worked really well for me because employees were leaving. There was only a few, but one was leaving. As he got in his car and he drove out, took up a minute or so. I thought, this is my chance. This is the time I can get in. So I floored the Ford Focus. Now, if you've ever driven one, they don't floor very well. They don't go very fast. The little tires squealed. I went shooting towards the gate. I went through the first gate at about 30 miles an hour. The second gate, I was braced for impact, but thankfully just missed the wing mirrors as I went flying into the car park. Trouble is, this car park, as most car parks are not designed for 30 miles an hour. I realised my mistake as I went careening through the second gate. I clipped a curb, went through a hedge, a small hedge, not too big, over another curb, and slammed on the brakes and screeched to a halt right outside this guy who was looking very confused. I found out later that he thought that I had just lost control of the car rather than was purposely aiming at him. I jumped out of the car before he could figure out what was going on, grabbed him and chucked him into the footwell of the rear seat. And before he knew what was happening and before he could get reoriented back upright, I had already started to make my exit. I flew through as quickly as I could with the gates, like shutting and opening, out of the gates, went down the road about a quarter of a mile. By this point, this guy had now got upright, and I had to explain to him that my job involves breaking into places for a living legally. So with the contract and everything with our clients, we get to do some amazing things, one of which is kidnapping people. So in this instance, I managed to explain to him what I was doing, why I was doing it, why he wasn't in danger. And we went through the whole process, and eventually he conceded that he had been kidnapped, and he gave over the passes once he'd spoken to my boss's boss. He gave me the passes. I was able to then infiltrate back in, using those passes back into the facility. I got in, and I did manage to steal millions of pounds from him. About a year later, actually, I'll tell that story later if I can. The point here is that even if you have the most amazing security, if someone has the time and resources to do recon and they are willing to go above and beyond what you're expecting, they can possibly get in. So, who am I and why am I talking about this to you? So I'm the co-founder of Sargenta, and you've heard me give one of the anecdotes from my career. I've been in this now for almost 3 decades, and as mentioned in the intro there, I am the author of How I Rob Banks, a collection of anecdotes from my career. And I'm going to share a few more of them with you throughout this talk. And hopefully it will give you an idea of why it's really important to take an attacker's mindset against all of your security. There's a bunch of stuff that you can probably find out on LinkedIn if you can find me on there about my previous roles. But as also mentioned, I live in Las Vegas now. My wife and I emigrated to the US about almost a year ago now, and it's very lovely, sunny and hot. So please, if you have questions, I will take them at the end. And let's get on with the rest of the stories, because it's not just people that get kidnapped in my role. I was once asked if I could steal a helicopter. Now, this might sound great, right? Like, so when someone came up to me and said, "Hey, can you steal our helicopter?" I was like, "Yes." Wait, no, I can't. I don't know how to fly a helicopter. But let's not stop there, right? Just because I can't fly a helicopter doesn't mean I can't steal it. Let's go ahead, right? So they apparently were getting a brand new helicopter, this company, and they had been kitting out. It's at the factory. It's going to be a few months away, so we had plenty of time to do recon on the building itself. I spent a good while looking at this building and realizing that there's not many ways into this building. Obviously, if you had a helicopter, that's a nice easy way. But I'll come to how we got in maybe a bit later. What happened with the rest of the work was sometimes these types of client engagements, they take a while, right? There's lots of paperwork to get done. So we're talking a time frame of months, and then we give a window of time because we don't want people to know when we're actually coming in. So we say between this date and this date, and sometimes that can be a month range. In this case, just as the job was getting close, I'd done some recon, but another client's piece of work got postponed, which meant I was able to bring this one forward. Now, it was right near the very beginning of that engagement period. So we hadn't had much communication. It's very nice of my watch, sorry. So with this in mind, I decided I'd go down to the site and we'll try and get in that first week. So I turn up at the site and everything's looking as it was in the recon. I found my way into a underground tunnel system that was near the building, got me into the basement levels of the building. And then I made my way up and I was able to get past a lot of the security systems they had at the front of the building and at the back of the building because no one was expecting anyone to come up through the tunnels. So I found myself in the secure location and I eventually made my way into the prep room for the pilots. I don't know what it's called. I'm not a pilot, but it's what you'd imagine, right? So it's a bunch of lockers with flight suits in and helmets and stuff. Except that's not what I found. When I went in, it was just a bunch of lockers, all empty, nothing in there, right? So I'm like, okay, maybe they just haven't kitted out, or maybe they wander around wearing them. I was hoping to look. If any of you are old enough to have seen the Clint Eastwood movie Firefox, where he puts on the helmet and he walks out to the plane, that's how I thought it was going to be. I was going to put on one of these jumpsuits, put on the helmet, and walk out to the helicopter. Some sort of Airwolf type esque thing. It looked very epic in my head, but I couldn't do that. Right? There were no flight suits, no helmets, so I basically just had to go up in jeans and a t-shirt. So there's a long walk up some stairs to get to the helipad. And as I'm walking up, I suddenly realized that during all of this prep time, there was one key piece of information that I had completely forgotten to look at. And that was, how do you get into a helicopter? Does it need a key? Does it have one of those alarm fob things? How do you even start a helicopter? Is that a key? Did I need to find keys back at the locker room? So I had no idea. So I phoned my friend back at the at base, and I'm like, "Hey, can you tell me how to open a helicopter?" And I gave him the modern name; it's an Airbus thing. And as he was googling how to hotwire a helicopter, I kick the door open to the helipad. I run up the stairs. I'm out of breath. There's no helicopter. Nothing there. It's just an empty pad. I mean, in a way, it was quite good because, I didn't kill myself trying to fly a helicopter that I don't know how to fly. But also, I didn't get to steal the helicopter itself. It was one of those disappointments in my job where everything goes right, but something goes wrong that it doesn't quite happen. It turns out that there was a delay at the factory outfitting this helicopter, and it was due at the end of the month. And I had accidentally come in at the very beginning of the month, and nobody had bothered to tell me. It was quite disheartening, I have to say. And as you can see, not everything in my job goes my way. I think it would have been fun. The client did acquiesce to the fact that I'd got onto the helipad, and that if the helicopter had been there, I probably could have stolen it. So they did beef up the security around their tunnels, but it's one of those failures that I have to take. And talking of failures, the next anecdote I'm going to tell you is a bit embarrassing, I have to say. So I was asked to break into a diamond merchant. So not particularly too hard. They're not as secure conscious as you'd imagine, because they're kind of hidden. right? You'll see all these buildings where you wouldn't expect there to be millions in diamonds inside these buildings. They're generally hidden among other buildings, very nondescript. So I went up to this one diamond merchant in the evening, and it was kind of on the edge of a council estate, so kind of sketchy area. And I'm looking for a way in, and I'm walking around. It's getting to about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and as I'm walking along, I almost get hit by a small window that suddenly gets popped open from the building because it's like head height, a tiny little thing, right? Not very big at all. It's about this big. Um, and so I'm like, oh, now I tend to carry either chewing gum or blue tack with me for particularly this reason. When I see something open up, I want to stop it from shutting uh, entirely, right? You want it to shut a little bit, but not all the way because then it can be latched. So I immediately stuck some chewing gum onto the window frame and went on with my day. I came back that afternoon or that evening, late evening, and I was looking around and I found that window and it had been attempted to be shut, but obviously because of the chewing gum, it couldn't shut and latch properly. So they just left it as shut as they could. So as I'm looking at this window and I'm like pulling it open, thankfully there's no alarm window on it, alarm sensor on it. Some kids come up and they're like, "Hey, mister, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Nothing, nothing to do with you. But if you want some money, you'll find me a ladder." So I gave them a couple of pounds at the time. I gave them some money, and they went off. And about 10 minutes later, they came back with a ladder. I have no idea where they got it from, but it was great. So I used that ladder to climb into this dark room. Didn't know what was going the other side. Um, if you ever go into a building, if you're ever breaking into a building like this, you always go in feet first, right? Never head first. You don't know what you're going to land on. So I go in feet first. And as I get in, like I say, this is quite embarrassing. As I'm going in through this window, my t-shirt gets pulled, it gets latched on the little window latch. So as I'm lowering myself in, my t-shirt is going up over my head, and I can't see anything. So now I'm dangling down into this room. I can't see anything. There could be literally 20 people in that room watching me. I just have no idea. And my foot finds something, so I'm like, okay, that's cool. So I lower my weight onto it, and as I do, my foot slips and goes straight into the toilet bowl. So now I'm stuck in a toilet with my foot in the water, getting soaking wet, and I can't get my t-shirt over my head. So after a few moments struggling in the dark, I managed to extract myself from the toilet, extract my head from my t-shirt. I literally just took it off. So here's a half-naked, wet, soaking man running around this diamond merchant stealing diamonds, and then extracted myself out the same way. Things don't always go my way. It's sometimes a little bit, muddy and dirty. It's not all fine dining. It's not all jewels for me, unfortunately. And talking of muddy and dirty, the next anecdote I think really highlights the effect of how people see security. They see security as like something you just throw budget at. You buy the latest blinking box, you buy the most expensive thing you can, and then you have security. Well, in this case, the client came to us and said, "Look, we've updated all of our security in this building. It's nice and secure now. We've spent £60,000 on this brand new revolving door." Obviously, I can't share a picture of that door. At the time, it was state of the art. It had lots of really cool gadgets that prevented access. I spent ages looking at this door. It was very well set up. The security of the site was very well done. There was 100 yards between the door and anything. I turned up there late one morning. It was like 3 a.m, something like that. And I climbed over their barbed wire fence. A good way of doing that, by the way, is actually shown in the movie Fight Club. You put a bit of carpet over the barbed wire. It does help to get over. So did that. Hid my bit of carpet near a tree. crawled on my hands and knees across the grassland, found a small ditch, put myself into this ditch. Now, this is in England during winter. It is that horrible slushy snow that everyone loves there. And I'm just getting frozen solid. It's very wet, like literally my entire body is wet. And I'm now crawling along in a mud ditch. And I make my way as close as I can to the door, and I watch it through night vision goggles. So I have all the cool tools, right? I have like the balaclavas and the night vision goggles, etc. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching this door for several hours, and I notice a flaw in it. And this comes back to that recon piece. So after about 3 or 4 hours in this muddy, wet, very, very cold ditch, I decide to crawl back along the creek, get back to my carpet, back over the fence, get back into the car. I mean, hire car companies love me because they just always get the cars back in great condition. I get back to my hotel, I have a quick shower, grab a nap, and then I'm waking up again to get there just in time for when it's opening up. So I'm in a nice suit and I'm walking along to the door. I'm not going to tell you how I got through the first bit. Walking along to the door, and it's coming up to 9 o'clock. And as I'm walking along, and what you'd see on the CCTV footage later is you can see me walking along. And as I'm walking along, I'm checking my watch. And as I check my watch, I very purposely pause mid-step just for about a second. And then I carry on walking. And I get just inside the door. Now, I haven't touched any of the security systems at all. And I step inside the door. And as I do so, the door rotates and I walk straight in. I haven't broken pace at all, apart from that one pause. Now, how this attack worked and why this was a flaw was these types of doors have what's known as an engineering mode. So that when builders put these doors in, not security professionals, when builders put these doors in, they put it into an engineering mode. And that is just basically a test to make sure that those doors are working correctly. In this case, every 15 minutes on the dot, this door would do one revolution to check that all of its bearings were running, nothing was catching. At some point during that installation process, they should have turned off that engineering mode. Now, because I'd watched this door for 3 hours through night vision goggles, I could tell precisely when that door was going to rotate and that it did it every 15 minutes. So all I had to do when I walked up to this door was pause ever so slightly as I stepped in to make sure that the timing was spot on. That meant there was no security at all. So what they've done was they've taken a fairly good security system, taken that out and put in a very expensive one that just didn't work. And I see that in all sorts of ways and forms within security, whether it's digital or physical. People just assume that you can buy security, but you have to have an understanding of how that fits into your ecostructure of everything, right? And how it all interplays with each other. Because all they've done is spent 60 grand to build an open door. Now, my job can get sketchy at times. Like I say, that's like 3 in the morning. I'm in ditches or I'm in council estates at like 9 p.m. My job is quite scary, but a lot of people still want to try and do it. So years ago, I had a colleague that I worked with who was like, dude, you have to take me on one of these shops. You just come back with the most amazing stories. Let's do one together. So I was like, okay, this time I will take you. He'd never done anything like this before. So we get to the site and we're doing some recon. And he suddenly realizes that this isn't all fun and games. We spend hours walking around this building, hours taking notes of where people are, what people are doing. And then I'm like, okay, we need to get a little bit closer. So we hop over a fence. This is the first time he's hopped over a fence, apparently. So he's a little bit more clumsy about it. We get over this fence, we pull open some drain covers, and we get into some dark tunnels. And they're really small, like really, really tiny, really dark. It's mucky. It's kind of like this picture, right? It's like it's full of water at the bottom. There's slime and mold on the walls. It's very Blair Witch, right? There are very few lights. So we're walking through these things, and I can hear him hyperventilating behind me. He is not particularly happy, A, with small spaces, or B, the dark. I've never really thought about it before, but these are some sketchy places I do end up in. So we're walking along, and it is slightly getting bigger. There's a whole room that we come across that is entirely flooded, and there's like floating desks and stuff. It looks horrific, and the smell. I'm really glad that I don't have a good sense of smell, but we're going around, and we think we're going up. It's a bit hard to tell underground, but we think we're going upwards towards the target. And there's a few more lights now, and then suddenly we see a door. So we're like, okay, great, we can head towards this, and we're heading there. Now my friend is a little bit panicky, so he sort of muscles past me to get out into the fresh air. And as he does so, he pushes the door open, and there's a big shadow of a person just stood there. He
Just a big shadow person.
He freaks out, right? He absolutely freaks out. He is not expecting anyone, but he's been expecting the boogeyman for the last half hour. So he goes to throw a punch at this shadow. Thankfully, oh my God, so thankful that I managed to intercept his terrible punch. I grab him by the arms and shove him forward. Turns out that there was a security guard who was just taking a smoke break. He'd found this little tunnel that heads out into the fresh air, and often took a little smoke break there. We ran so much, like we literally just ran through this town until we got to this park, and our legs were burning. And he was just laying on the ground, like, I am never doing this again. Like, this is just the worst experience ever. So not many people can do this job. It's a bit stressful. Let's put it that way. Unfortunately, our actions and his actions meant that the security team did lock down the building a little bit more. The exit door that we came out of, that was shut off entirely. Thankfully, though, they never did lock up the original entranceway that we got in. So I was able to infiltrate the tunnels again about a month later, get into their system. I managed to find a better way through into the building, got into the building, and managed to do my objectives. Now, it's really important that you look everywhere when you're doing these types of incursions, right? Because you never know what you're going to find. In one case, I had broken into a corporate office. It was not a particularly huge office. It was in the middle of the city, and I look in every cupboard, right? Every nook and cranny that I can whenever I'm in a building, because you never know what is behind these doors. Now, in this one particular instance, I had spotted a very thin, like it was just a little bit wider than me, maybe, a very thin, tall door, and it kind of looked like the door that you would put, sort of cleaning equipment in, like brooms and hoovers and stuff like that, right? So everyone walks past it, but it's right close to the two CEO offices. Now, that's a bit interesting, because generally cleaners bring their own stuff. But okay, right. So I'm opening all the cupboards, and I open this one, and I'm like, ooh, that's a bit interesting. And I go and explore it. And then later on, I have to do a wash-up meeting with our client, and that generally involves me taking them around all of the places that I've been in their building, right? Because most of the time, they don't believe that I'm even going to get into the building, let alone all of these secure areas. So I'm walking our client around. He is the new head of security, right? He's been there like a couple of weeks, and he's intrigued by all of the failures that have happened throughout this building. And so I mentioned to him, like, oh, and the staircase to the car park, and he's like, staircase to the car park? We don't have a car park here. You've obviously gone to the wrong place. I'm like, no, it's a secret staircase. And he's like, show me. So we walk up to this tiny little cupboard, and from his perspective, what he sees is I open this cupboard door, and like Harry Potter, I walk in and then I disappear. And then a few moments later, from my perspective, at the bottom of this spiral staircase, I see a head pop through the door and a look of astonishment as he realizes that this door is a tiny little secret door that leads to a tiny little staircase that goes all the way down into the basement that he didn't know about, where the CEOs keep their cars. So the CEOs come in, and they come through. Everyone knows they're there, and then they can just leave whenever they need. They can use this spiral staircase to get to their cars and then just drive off, and then come back for a day. And he had absolutely no idea that this entrance existed. Right? Obviously, you could use that for infiltration as well. He was flabbergasted, right? And it's really important that when you take over a new role, you have to know everything that you have, otherwise you cannot protect them, right? So you have to know your assets, whether it's digital or physical, otherwise you absolutely cannot protect something that you do not know about. Sometimes though, it's a bit easier than that for me. Sometimes I have an easy time of my job. I was asked once to rob an investment bank. Now, an investment bank is slightly different to your normal high street bank. They have, they actually have a vault sometimes in their building that has gold bars in. So could I steal a gold bar from their safe? Well, I know how to crack a safe. In my book, I actually teach you how to crack a safe. So if that's not incentive to buy the book, I don't know what is. But in this case, it was like, okay, can I break into this investment bank, which is pretty easy to do, to be honest, because most of them don't have the good security. But getting the gold bar, that's interesting. Now, interestingly, with these types of safes, they're incredibly heavy, and they're generally too heavy to put on a floor. So they're generally built into the basement, right? They generally build the safe and then build the building around the safe because you just can't move, right? It's massively heavy. So I knew that I had to get down as far as I could in the building, right? So I was at basement level 2 as I walked into this area, and I could see the safe. It was just this huge thing encased in concrete in the middle of the room. You can't see it was like the central pillar of this room. As I'm walking around this huge square, I come across the entranceway, and there's the big door. Right, it's got all of the fancy dials that you'd expect, like it's Hollywood movie style, right? And it's open. It's just ajar. And so I'm like, okay, this is obviously set up. There's no people on this floor. The safe is open. I peek in, and there are hundreds of gold bars, like the big gold bricks on these blue pallets. And I have to say, blue and gold works really well in this setting, but it was astounding. And it's like, oh my God, they've just left the door open. At any point now, someone is going to pop their head out and arrest me or something. I don't know quite what's going on. I'm now on edge. As I walk into the vault, I think someone's going to shut the door on me. They're not going to know I'm here. So I very quickly grab one of the gold bars. Now, a lot of people don't know how heavy they are. They are incredibly heavy. They're incredibly dense. When you see it in the movies that people are like chucking them around, that never happens, right? They're really heavy. So I managed to get this gold bar out of the safe, still thinking someone's going to get me at some point. Now, I obviously can't walk out with a gold bar on my arm. Someone's going to notice that. So I grab a backpack that's not in use, and I chuck this gold bar in, wrap up my coat at the bottom so it doesn't pierce it and go through because it's quite sharp. And I just walk out of the building, and I walk around the corner to a little cafe, and I call up my client. I tell him what I've done, and he comes running into the cafe. He can't believe it. He is just like out of breath, and he's like looking at me. And so I just dump this gold bar out of my my stolen backpack, and it just falls onto the thing. And then I unwrap it, kind of like Indiana Jones, like some sort of archaeologist, like here it is, and just this gold shines, and he is just like, what the hell? So we end up doing a similar scene in the boardroom for everyone. So yeah, sometimes it's as easy as just walking into a building and stealing a gold bar. Sometimes though, with this type of work, I have to take a bus to work. Now, why would I take a bus to work? Well, In this case, our client had asked me to break into their facility. Their facility was incredibly well secured. Like, it is one of the best that I had seen. It had everything that I could have possibly suggested to them to do. They were already doing it, and I knew this was going to be a tough one. They were checking everyone that was going through the barriers. Like, if you weren't even expected as a visitor, you were turned away. They had cameras, they had armed guards. It was flawless. It was really beautiful to see. They had one issue though, and again, this comes down to recon. I'd spent ages doing recon on this building, and I noticed one issue. They ran a park and ride system. So because they didn't have a very big car park on site, if you're an employee there, you parked down the road, got a little bus, and you got through. So basically, one morning, about 6 a.m., I drove into this car park, this park and ride car park. There was no security there. There was one dude who was stood in a little cabin thing, but it was raining, so he didn't come out to check me. So I pull up in the car and I just stop. And I wait for the little park and ride bus to come up. It's not marked with anything, so you wouldn't know where it's going. And basically, I'm the first person on the bus. The driver doesn't care about who I am, because who else is getting on this bus apart from employees? So he doesn't even bother checking badges. A couple of other people turn up, and we trundle down the road in this little bus. I've got some great photos from the bus, by the way. So as we're driving along, we pull up to the barrier. Now, because this bus is expected, and they know everyone on board is an employee, they just check the number plate of the thing, they check the driver, and then they let them through. So the barrier's open, we drive in. Nobody has spoken to me, let alone checked any badges, and they drop everyone off at reception. So now I've just infiltrated like a ridiculously secure site just by taking a bus to work for once. Is a interesting thing, and it shows that you really need to have your wits about you at all times in this job, because you have to be able to take opportunities when they come. And I think a great way to finish up today is showing how my razor sharp awareness has always been there, and it comes in so handy when you're trying to break into places. So I'm going to tell you about the first time I robbed a bank. So the first time I robbed a bank was in London, and basically it was like 2-3 in the morning. I had a balaclava on, but it was rolled up to look like a sort of a beanie cap, right? It's always good to wear balaclavas just in case you need one. So I'm stood there, and this is my first bank, and it is intimidating. It's not a high street bank. It's kind of a investment-ish type one in the central London. And I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. I've never done anything like this before. It's quite intimidating. So I am lost in thought. Now, 3 a.m. in the middle of London, it's very, very quiet. So yeah, everything's nice and calm. And I'm studying this building. I'm just looking at it. This was pre-Google Earth or Google Street View, so I had to be there on site. And I was stood there cross-armed like this, looking at it, just thinking, okay, maybe if I get in through there. I was like trying to build a map of the internals based on the windows, etc. And I'm looking at it, and I suddenly hear a sort of a cough behind me, and someone says, "Oh, excuse me, mate, what are you up to?" Now I am lost in thought. Now you have to remember, this is my first time ever robbed a bank, so I'm lost in thought, looking at this building, and without even looking around, I'm like trying to work out how to break into this bank. I then decide that I should maybe turn around and talk to this chap. I turn around. There's 2 police officers stood there asking me what the hell I am doing. Like, I have just confessed that I'm trying to rob this bank, and they're like, just literally like, are you dumb? Like, what have you just said? So it took hours to convince them about my job, and the bank itself had hired me to break into it. It sounded like science fiction to them. They were just like, they didn't believe it until they'd verified it with the bank, and they'd verified it with my employee at the time. It was hilarious, but it shows that sometimes You just need to keep your wits about you. So I think that's about all I can talk about today. And if anyone has any questions, I would be absolutely delighted to answer them.
Looking out to the floor, any questions for FC? If you stick your hand up, we'll bring a microphone to you so that people can hear and also so FC can hear. Stony silence. I do have one for you, actually. So in one of your internet videos, you do a session with a bunch of teenage schoolgirls doing wiretapping,
Yes.
which is A, fascinating, B, potentially illegal, and C, how did you end up doing that with a bunch of school kids?
So we like to basically teach children or anyone that wants to learn all of these techniques that criminals can use, right? Now, we're not trying to teach them criminal behavior. We're trying to say, look, this is how it can happen, right? And because if you know how something can happen, you can defend against it, right? So in this case, it was, can you break into a telephone system and extract data off of that telephone system? So we had a sort of a pre-built little rig that was actually actively monitored. So if anyone had cut a wire, it set off an alarm, right? So this isn't your standard telephone or network system. It was simulating a very well secured adversarial network. And basically we were teaching them how to splice into the wires, how to get data off of those wires, how to decrypt that data. And it was all part of a series of events that we did as part of our outreach at Sygenta.
Also, you mentioned, obviously, you've now lived the other side of the pond for about a year. Is that with a view to carry on doing what you do, but in the new market?
Yeah, basically, the market in the UK is quite small. We've been there for some time. We got fed up with the snow and the coldness, and we loved Nevada, where it's nice and dry and very hot all the time. And we're doing a lot of presentations. I do a lot of speaking events. So does my wife. We run the company together, and we were flying over to America a fair bit for these types of presentations. So we thought we would come over here just in time to not be able to come to you in person, unfortunately.
I'm going to look out on the floor again in case any hands go up. There is a hand in the background behind you, Steph.
I can see it. I can see it on the camera.
Oh, there's two. Go for it.
Hi. Oh my God, that's really loud. Sorry. At the beginning, when you were saying about the kidnapping, you mentioned that you were going on a train of thought. You said a year later, and then you said, "Oh, I might tell you that at the end."
Yes. Okay. So about a year later, I had to go back and do just a normal digital penetration test that involved that data center. So I had to turn up at that same place that I'd broken into, and I went through the whole security mechanisms as I should do that time, right? Because I didn't have remit to do anything. And I turn up, and I'm in the security office, and just as I'm signing in, I see the guy that I had kidnapped, and he clocks me, right? We engage eyes, like it's that moment of recognition. And he comes absolutely sprinting at me, and I am terrified, right? Like, I don't know what's happened in the past year. I don't know how much trouble he got into or anything. And so he comes sprinting at me, and I'm expecting a fight, so I'm like sort of getting ready to throw down. And he comes up and he gives me just the biggest hug, right? And he is jumping up and down with excitement. I've never seen anyone more excited to see me than this guy. He was so happy, and he was dragging me back into the security office, and he was trying to introduce me to his friends and the security team. And it's like, this is the guy that kidnapped me from like last year. Apparently what had happened is they all thought he'd kind of made it up and had just bunked off for an hour. So they thought that he had they'd come out and he wasn't anywhere around. So they just assumed that he had like left his post for a bit. And so he was trying to explain that he got kidnapped, and they were like, yeah, right, you got kidnapped. So it was just a funny little end to it about a year later.
did I see a hand up in Mr. Palmer's corner?
You did, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, FC. I have one question for you. A lot of us are trying to build engagement in cyber security. And of course, the traditional way of doing this is by giving people like a CBT exercise that is a bit like reading a dictionary backwards. Do you have any advice for organisations, for people, as to how they can build good engagement in cyber, make it engaging and take people with them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be a little bit biased here. I would say, engaging speakers, such as the ones we've seen today, is a good way of showing knowledge, sharing knowledge, and entertaining people. I think if you're doing training that isn't entertaining, people are going to get bored very, very quickly. And hopefully my presentation has been entertaining and not very boring for people. But I think if you move away from the traditional methods, of CBT and just like clicking through, because I don't know if anyone in this audience has ever completed one of those and actually read everything. I go through it as quickly as I possibly can. Back when I used to have to do that, but I find speakers really, really engaging. I learn more from listening to people than I do anything else, especially if they've got some photographs or pictures or anecdotes like that. So yeah, for me, it's this.
Anybody? Yes, question over there.
Hello, speaking from experience here, a lot of people are overly friendly, and one of the sort of pen testing routes is that, the cop-out is social engineering. What sort of technologies exist, like things like fast gates and so on, that you can put in place that get around the fact that people want to be nice and will continue to be nice no matter how much you educate?
So that's a really great question, right? So what technologies can we put in place that mitigate some of the human behaviors? Well, you can put in loads of technology. There are great technologies. There are some issues with it, right? So every technology that you put in place, all it does is it slows down the adversary, right? So if you have someone, say you have a door system, right? Just a normal door, anyone can walk in. Basically, a crime of convenience can happen, right? So anyone can just walk in. So you put in a security door. Well, that just means certain people can't get in. I like to say that locks only keep honest people out, because they do, right? If a door is locked, an honest person won't try and get through it, whereas a criminal will, right? Because they need to get through that door. An attacker will. If you're dealing with a nation-state level attacker, they have the means, they have the time, they have the budget, and the tools and techniques to get through these doors. So all you're doing with putting in security is you're just adding an extra layer, an extra step to slow down the adversary. Now, you mentioned those barriers, right? They're great, except with security, we always have an issue of balancing health and safety, right? So in an ideal world, a security barrier will let one person through and then slam shut, right? And just not care if it captures anything within that time frame, right? But we can't have that, right? We can't have humans being injured by security systems. So if you go in and you just hold those security gates open, they do not have the force to take your fingers off. So you can just walk through them anyway. It might set off an alarm, but most of the time that doesn't really matter anyway. So yeah, you just have to be cognizant of the fact that any security system you're putting in, whether it's digital or physical, is just there as a means to slow the adversary down. It may not stop them entirely, because you don't know if someone's found a whole new way of entering that premises. So think of your security like an onion. It has to have layers, or like Swiss cheese. Swiss cheese can have holes in it, but as long as it doesn't go all the way through, then you're going to be secure. Okay?
Any more questions from the floor? No? Oh, yep, we've got one over here, Steph, please.
Just for a bit of fun, FC, if we can crowdfund it, could you steal Max Verstappen's race car before the start of the Vegas Grand Prix?
I tell you what, most vegans are not going down to the strip at the moment. Most of the people that live here You know, the Vegas Strip is 1.5 miles by 1 mile wide, and most locals kind of avoid it most of the time. And all of the F1 stuff has just ruined everything down there. It is just absolute. It's a terrible thing that's happened. I don't think anyone's going to really care about the F1 basically here. But yeah, I would love to try and do something like that with the F1.
I've got one actually. So apart from a book called How I Rob Banks by someone nearby, if we were to read one book on security, what would you suggest it be?
Oh, I would suggest the books that my wife has written. So Confidence on Security. And
that was well played.
Coming out. I know, you didn't even know about it. So she's now writing her 4th book. That's called Hacked, and it will be out sometime near Christmas, I believe. So, yeah, I would suggest anything by Dr. Jessica Barker, MDE. There we go.
That's your Chrissy Prezi sorted.
Yeah.
Anybody else from the floor? Thank you very much indeed. FC, it's been an absolute delight to have you on.
Thank you so much.
It's nicer speaking to you from here. Last time we spoke, I was in the cafe at Paddington Station, so it's a little bit more comfortable here. Thank you so much, and have a great day when it eventually starts, because you're rather a few hours behind us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.